Steam is everywhere. It powers your cities, your trades. It's the reason you can have a hot shower. But beware of the land being exploited. And that's the theme in this Euro game, Daitoshi. And hello everyone, it's Stella here.
And Tarrant from Meeple University. Welcome to our 7-point review for Daitoshi.
We are going to review 7 aspects of the game, which are the information of the game, overview, thematic and mechanics, and our 7-point review, which is the theme, the artwork, the mechanics, personal puzzle versus interaction, who we think this game is for, what other games feel similar, and the things we enjoy the most and least, and the summary.
So before we get into it, if you do enjoy this review after watching it, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this, and let us know in the comments what games you've been enjoying these holidays.
So with that, let's get to the game info first. So Daitoshi was designed by Danny Garcia, who also designed games like Barcelona, Windmill Valley, Arborea, and more, which some of these we really enjoy. Publisher is Devi Games, and it plays 1 to 4 players, and I would say the complexity would be medium to heavy, and we got this game as a review copy. Alright, now let's get to the overview of the theme and mechanics. In the world of Daitoshi, players are magnates in the era of new Steam-powered inventions, using Steam to power your actions and managing the consequences of your actions.
So I have the game set up here with only one player's pieces out there. This is the main board, which everyone shares, and then you've got a player board. Each turn, you're going to take either a city turn or a production turn. If you take a city turn, you're going to move your magnate around the rondel. You can go up to 2 districts for free, but then you can pay Steam to continue going further. Then, depending on how much Steam you pay in the area you go to, you can place workers from your supply on workshop spaces in that district to get the benefits. Then you have to exploit the land in that district, which means you take one of these hexes off its matching track, put it into your player board, and that will give you matching coloured workers and either steam or coal, which will lead to generating more steam. And so you can see how those first 3 steps kind of fold together. You need steam to move, steam to place workers, and then you exploit to get workers and steam. And then you take the main action in that district. And there are 5 main actions. You could build a new district. So there are these new districts here, and that expands the power and the number of workshops and things in these districts for everyone. You could electrify a district, so that gives you some rewards, and you flip the district over, making it again more powerful for everyone. You can go and visit one of these city spaces, and this largely involves you spend some steam, you get points, and you get bonuses that you activate by putting your flags onto these cities. You can buy new inventions that go into your factory, so this is going to help you with production. And you can contribute to the Mega Machine. So the Mega Machine is this blimp. It's in a changing location. It's going to move around the board as people visit it, and it allows you to take one of your inventions, if it's ready, it has to have been upgraded a bit before it's ready, and put it over into the Mega Machine for a bunch of points. And that will also upgrade the Mega Machine, so it has its own workshop that's going to get more powerful for everyone as well. And then finally, there is one of these spaces here, which is wild. It lets you take any of the other 5 actions. The other way you can spend your turn is a production turn. When you produce, everyone can produce from their factory, so you have to spend steam, and then you get the stuff that's printed on all the inventions. Whoever is the leader gets more. And as you activate them, that pushes all these little cubes up. And that's the thing which is going to ultimately increase the power of your factory or make it available to go over to the Mega Machine. Now, there's an important balance which happens with this area. These are the hexes you collect. This is called your exploitation record. So every time you gain something from here, you're getting workers and the constituents to form steam. But if you have more than one of a given type, that's going to weaken your player board. So there's all these little overlays on your player board which set the price of activating factories or things like that. If you get too many, well, if you get more than one of a given type of hex, that is going to weaken a part of your player board. So you've got less capacity to hold workers, or maybe the price of your factories goes up. So you need to balance that, because that's a key way of gaining resources versus the consequence of having done that. Then the other key thing that's going on is, as players are taking these hexes off, they are opening up tracks. And everyone has these little pilgrim pieces, and when you unlock track advancements, you choose one of these tracks to go along. Each of them relates to a specific different way of scoring at the end of the game. So there's one that lets you score extra points based on how much you've contributed to the Mega Machine. There's one that lets you score extra points or lose extra points based on how many tiles you have in your exploitation record, and so on. The game's going to end once one of these tracks is cleared other than the last tile. So players are very much setting when the end of the game is going to be, and then you add those final scores and the highest score wins. So the game is set in the Bitoku universe. This is called the Kamushi Saga, for which there are several games which Dev here has released. And they've got on the back of the rulebook here, and I think they're doing this in all their rulebooks, the chronology of where it sits chronologically in that saga. And look, that's a relatively loose theme. There's not a great deal of mechanical consistency, but you get the same artistic consistency, a few familiar components like the pilgrim pieces. I think we saw them in Bitoku, I think so, and the worm. The worm, yes. I do like this bit of consistency. They've got these bus pieces, they're worm buses. The worms were the way of transporting stuff around in sand, and so yeah, I like the thought of a worm pulling a bus. It is very clever if publishers trying to tie the games together in the same universe, not necessarily the same game at all. It's like Garfield Games does that well in the series of South Tigray, series of like all the directional, northwest, whatever. Yeah. I will say the Bitoku universe doesn't really grab me. I would probably enjoy it a little bit more if it was set in Industrial Revolution or something like that. But it works, and the consistency between the games in the saga, you can see it there. I think for me, the industrial theme is neutral to me. I'm not, like, you like the industrial more than me. That's sort of like universe. But this is like industrial fantasy, which is like also great. Action to some degree, I feel thematic, which is, I mean, it's industrial. You're trying to exploit the earth, and then you have to pay the consequences over here. So it's a lot of like the land that you get. So pretty much all action that you do, you need to pay the consequences. Like, you know, destroying some lakes and, you know, the forest, the mines, the mountain, and so on. So you need to manage that in your action as well. So that bit is kind of thematic. And you need to somehow manage this well, because the negativity, you can, you know, when you can just turn it around, it can give you points. Now the art and components. The artwork is by Marina Fidel, who seems, I think it's quite new in the board game world. But overall, the art and graphic design is great. It's functional. And I like the building, how they add the rondel, you know, to the building. So like the size is different. It's kind of like, it's circular. I don't know, something about circular. It's great. So you add the building like so. You adding it like the starting building here, and then the next layer, and the next layer is getting bigger and bigger, and also functional. Obviously, I like the chunky pieces, chunky components, wooden components here. And I think they balance it well with artwork and the graphic design. So I like a game with pretty games, but it doesn't actually have to discount how you play the game, the user-friendliness of the game. Yeah, the art is vibrant, perhaps a little bit brighter than the gameplay makes me feel, but it is nice art there. They have done very well with the components, the practicality of the components. These flippable tiles work well. Very important, I think, that they've gone with the double-layered player boards, because you know, moving these little cubes, they've got these little zigzag tracks for them. And because they're small cubes that are getting moved frequently, that is almost necessary to keep the game organized. It's like, not like Terraforming Mars, the original game? Yes, I mean, we love Terraforming Mars. But I think everyone, well, I think they set the opposite of the standard. But anyway, you really... You don't always really need dual layer player boards, but I think in this game you do because of how much you're moving these cubes. So good on that.
Yep. And it is beige. I mean, it's not beige just because Euro games is beige, but it's sand, you know, that sort of like theme universe is beige. Like, who doesn't like beige? I like beige. You?
Yeah. It's very neutral.
Well said.
One other thing which I think is nice and it's kind of clever, and they've probably done it to save on components, but you've got this little track where you gain coal and you gain water, and you use the combination of those to form steam. And rather than having coal and water components, they've got this chimney that you move up and down, and
that is smart.
You only gain the steam. You only gain the steam when you move in the direction of the arrows. So it doesn't look intuitive initially, but it's actually just kind of a clever way of avoiding having water and coal components. So good on them for that. I did accidentally demonstrate the one downside of this, which is the chimney's way too tall and very easy to knock over. Could have been a shorter piece.
Yeah.
Kind of cute, but...
It's just like we both are quite awkward. I mean, not everyone's like us, but us, like, even though you mentioned about this zigzag thing, I still knock that off. I mean, that's completely my fault. But I do love this engine building element of the components, but we'll talk about this other bit later.
All right, so third we'll talk about mechanics or mechanisms, and we'll at least talk about a couple of specific ones that we liked or thought was interesting. So the first one for me is the shared world building. There's a lot of things in here where your actions are contributing to what becomes available and more powerful for everyone, which is a nice feature that does keep a game interactive. So you are adding these new districts which come with better workshops. You are flipping them over to make them better. You are jointly clearing these tracks, and that becomes an interesting thing, because if you want to advance on a track but no one else is taking the action which drives that track, you are going to get stuck at the end of the track without having to do it. And they've got it well set up so that the action which increases the track is not the action which is going to score the most points for having done the thing on that track. So lots of that shared world building there. We mention it down here as well. I like that aspect of the game. I like to see that. We always talk, I like to see some level of interaction or jointness in a game, not something where you're just fully building up your own player board. So it does that. Like
Arborea, the same designer.
Yes. And then the personal thing, which was very interesting, and I alluded to it before, was what's called conflict and exploitation. The fact that you do get stuck with these tiles until you can take actions that get rid of them. And if you spend a lot of actions getting rid of them, that's going to occupy a lot of your time trying to figure out how to get rid of them. Whereas if you just build up a lot of tiles, that you can do that. You're going to get resources more quickly. You can take the wild action because the wild action makes you exploit twice as fast. But it's going to break your player board, and it's going to make certain things much worse. Like you're going to make steam 2 at a time instead of 3 at a time. You can't hold a whole lot of workers, so you can't plan up and get big workshop combinations. Managing that and deciding which way you're going to go, or in the moment managing tight decisions of which one do I want to make go bad. That is a very fascinating personal thing to play with, and it balances out nicely at the end, because the river track here is going to score negative points for all of your excess conflict tiles and positive points for any of these spaces that are empty. So it ends up having this big point swing at the end, and you can either mitigate that or earn more points by really rocketing up that track. So it's one of these nice things that some games have. I remember the Skywatch in Shackleton Base had that, where you could try to avoid letting your things get exploded, or you could just go up a track so that you don't lose any points for your stuff getting exploded. Yep. So I like it when you've got that kind of decision to play with.
As you say, there's some punishing actions in here. Normally, I prefer the actions to be more positive rather than negative. I'm not saying in a bad way, it just is. The punishing action is, of course, the getting the tiles. But in this one, I love it because you just force to find a way. It's not always that easy. You are forced to find a way to get rid of the tiles, and focusing on what point you want to get towards the end. As Tarrant said, it could be a big swing when you at one game you ended up with 16 tiles or something like that, and you got like some negative points. Well, I ended up only with some other games with 2 tiles, and then I've got 2 empty. So that means which track I'm going to focus on if I go to that strategy. There are though a few things, because it's a lot of personal puzzle. There are times when you just like focus on your own board, and I do love my rondel. So this is around pieces that you try to manage. I mean, it's not that punishing. You can still pay Steam. There are times where you don't have Steam. There are times you do, but you can always spend Steam to go to anywhere. But then even though anywhere, they might be blocked with, to do certain things by other players.
Yeah, each of these spaces has one space where you can clear the workers off and then put your own workers, one where you just put your own workers, and one where you ignore the workers. And other players can block the subset that you might want.
That's true. So, other side, I love engine building, I always do. And this is very good. The production run, if you build on your engine, which I usually do, and upgrade your tiles, you gain the benefit all of this rather than just this one, for example. And there is a limit on production run, as Tarrant mentioned. I really enjoy the mechanic. So let's get to the next point, Tarrant.
Yeah, we'll talk about how personal versus interactive the game is.
Yes. Let me continue my discussion from before. Back into engine building. So the engine building, and then there are times where you focus on your turn. You just focus on what you're going to plan ahead, what you're going to do. And one of them is production round, right? But if you do production round, all other players also do their production run for free, but not as powerful. But that's the interaction and help with the downtime. If somebody, let's give example, Space. I mean, it's completely different game and completely different feeling. But in Space, you would like, oh, what are you doing? Like this feels like that when somebody is doing production round, and then you be like, oh, doing production round. All right, let me just like increase my production as well. So that part's really good.
And it does kind of change pace during the game as well. Early on, resources are quite tough to come by early on, and so a lot of the timing of production is more about hoping that your opponents are going to do it, or trying to position yourself to have enough steam to activate when it's that time. Towards the end of the game, players will have very different engines.
Yeah.
And if you've got a really weak production, it's going to be bad for you to be running productions and letting other players take it. So that is both a shifting balance and a very interesting one.
And I realized the first time I played this, I just have got that mentality to just keep going. And then I was like, oh yeah, I can do production turn. I was like, that's how I get resources. It's not one of those games like in Tasia or something. You need to try to do as many actions as possible before end of the round or production. But this is like, okay, you want to do production. That's why they limit you to do production not twice in a row.
Yeah. I guess on the subject of interaction, I'll talk about Danny Garcia, because we mentioned a few Garcia-released games like Barcelona and Arborea. It's very clear that the games that he's been coming out with recently they have intentionally some level of interaction, and more than many designers have at the moment. So,
like Windmill Valley as well.
Windmill Valley as well.
Yeah.
So Windmill Valley, it had like the water wheel that had some impact on everyone's play. Barcelona, you were putting tokens down as a worker that then got taken off for players to put pieces down. Arborea had the tracks that you were advancing, making everyone's actions more powerful. So they're not highly cutthroat things, but it gets everyone on a common board having some level of interaction. It's a clear feature of Garcia's designs. And so I certainly saw that in the rules here. You've got the rondel, the tracks, and the production, and all these things we're talking about, building the world jointly. I did find that as we played, it is a bit more individual than I thought it was going to be from the rules. And I think why I say that is there is a lot of personal optimization going on, and if you're getting blocked out or the tracks haven't advanced as fast as you want, it's really only going to cost you a steam here or there, a suboptimal track advancement here or there, which is a couple of points out of 200 or something like that. So it is, for all of the joint stuff, I did feel it was a little less interactive than, say, Arborea, or it was probably between Arborea and Barcelona.
Barcelona, yeah. I agree with this track though. If you are focusing on certain track and then you're the one that working on your own, no one else is removing this track, no one else is doing the actions that are relevant to this track, for example, and then you ended up just having to clear it and having to advance it yourself. It's quite hard work.
Yeah, and that's quite an interesting element at 2 players as well.
Yeah,
because you don't have that sharing of everything.
Yeah, in more than 2 players, then, things get revealed faster, potentially. And this is probably part of the things that could be interactive, because you're watching what other players are doing and then you're taking advantage on, so somebody else is clearing a lot of the water tiles and then you want to go for that one.
Yeah. And the end game trigger is a part of that as well. Arborea had this as well, where the end of the game would be triggered by how fast a certain action was being done. In this case, if you've got a lot of players doing the same type of action, that track is going to clear quickly and the game can run quite short. If everyone is doing everything in balance, it's going to run quite long. And I noticed that with Arborea as well. It is a bigger than average disparity in how long the shortest game will go versus the longest game.
Next is who this game is for, we think.
It's very much for heavy gamers, and I think the biggest reason for that is it's not intuitive. And I know that can sound like a bad thing to say, but it's just the way things combo, the way the chimney works, the way the conflict actions work. It doesn't immediately connect to theme or connect to typical mechanisms in a way that a mid-weight gamer is going to pick up. They'll become quite confused.
It's kind of like a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, intuitive means it's different. So, yeah, as heavy gamers, Euro gamers who enjoy planning ahead, and to a certain degree, it probably feels a little bit of Lacerda style of trying to chain actions, which ones go first. These things don't always go easy, and it is medium to the heavy complexity, as we mentioned.
Yeah, many steps on your turn as well. Each turn is going to have 4 steps, and the main action will have a couple of steps. So a lot of things to make sure you're keeping track of.
Yes. So on to the next point, which is what other games are similar to this?
And for me, the game that I got memories of, you mentioned Lacerda, is On Mars. And part of why I got that is that you have that same joint world building, and throughout the first half of the game in particular, it had that On Mars feeling where building wasn't building. Like, it was always the toughest thing about On Mars was that it broke the normal paradigm. Anytime you build something in a board game, I'm paying resources and getting a building. Whereas in On Mars, you were exchanging resources and contributing to a joint building.
Yeah.
And early in the game, when resources are tight, I kind of felt this was the same way. All the actions you were doing were also about scraping out that next resource you needed to do a subsequent action to avoid doing production.
Yeah. Well, there are no other games that I can think of. I mean, Windmill Valley, maybe? Because that's designed by the same designer. It has Rondel. But even that, it's not really that similar. So I think it's quite different. I mean, On Mars a little bit, but there's nothing quite like it, I think. Finally, the 7th review is the things we enjoy the most and least.
So for me, the most enjoyable thing was managing that balance between getting lots of tiles and how that weakens your player board. That felt very different. It felt very fun. And there are definitely big optimization to do there, and you can swing it through the game. So I really enjoyed that. My least favorite thing was that it was a tricky teach and a tricky learn because of some of the non-intuitive connections that were being made. It's a fair hurdle to get over to start.
And for me, the thing I enjoy the most is the engine building. So there's opportunity to that, and I can engine build my engine. So it's like building engine over engine. That's really satisfying. The rondel, obviously, I like the rondel. The other thing that could potentially be the least enjoyable is because there are so many things you can do. You tend to just have to work on your own. Like I mentioned it earlier, where you need to build your track on your own, and some other action you can completely almost ignore together, and that contributes to not getting rid of the certain tiles. I'll give you an example. This action down here, obviously this is actually, let me just find out where it is, because this is like placed randomly, this one. So this one, for example, you don't keep doing this, so naturally, the natural forest is not being cleared from the board, right? So that means that if trying to score points from that and starting to, what do? You're not doing that, you're not clearing up, so you basically almost ignore that potential points. So overall, do you like it, Tarrant?
I do like it. I think it's a great game. I think it's a tough one to get to the table. I don't think it will get as many plays as other Devias or other Garcia games, but I do like it.
Yep, so do I. I love overall, like all those things that I like the least. It's just probably my rant. My Tarrant. Sorry, that's really bad. Bye, everyone. No, not yet. So hopefully you enjoyed it. You find it useful. If you have played Daitoshi or you have played other Devi games, what's your favorite? Let us know. And hopefully you have a great day. Like and subscribe if you like. Let us know what you think. And have a great day. Bye.